Hey everyone, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here.
Jeff here, hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful Mr Jeff McErlain.
Hello. Thank you very much, yes.
I've learned something, Jeff.
Yeah.
I've been calling you McErlain.
And you know,
Yes.
I never correct anyone because it should be pronounced that way.
Right.
Okay.
But I don't know why the family calls it McErlain and parents are from here, don't understand it, you know. So I just roll with it, you know.
And there it goes.
Yeah.
Okay, there may be many of you out there that know Jeff from his many and varied tuition efforts. Tons and tons of stuff on TrueFire, which is how I found you first. But I reckon we must have met at NAMM shows and things in the past.
I think we met at NAMM once at the Collings. I was doing something with Collings. I met you guys
okay.
there,
Could
yeah.
well be that, yeah.
But, you know, your celebs there, so, you know, you were, there was a lot of people around you guys, so, you know.
But also, when you see somebody on a screen your whole life, you kind of feel like you know them anyway.
Yeah.
And that's how we feel with you. So thank you so much for joining us.
I'm
Yeah.
overjoyed to be here. Thank you so much. It means a great deal. I've made it. I love the show. Watch it all the time.
Bless you.
Oh,
Yeah,
mate,
it's
thank you.
so much fun.
No, it's always a trip seeing you pop up on the live stream.
Oh, okay.
Every now and then.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, Jeff's on. It's great.
So what's facilitated you being with us today then? Why are you here?
Well, I'm in town doing guitar breaks with Ian and Tim, who are off camera right now. So hello, guys. And, you know, got to visit some family, which has been great, too. So that's been, they offered me to come, and I have any chance to travel and go do some stuff and meet
Awesome.
people. And, of course, coming to meet you guys as well was a huge perk of the whole situation.
But you've been touring as well.
I have. It's got off a 3-week tour in the Czech Republic with my band. That was been going great, and we're just setting up some stuff hopefully next year and getting some booking agents. Hopefully that'll pan out here, maybe, but in Italy and Germany and Austria. So working on that. So I'm trying to expand the band, get back into performing. But it's been fun.
That's cool. What does the band look like then? What kind
It's
of
a
stuff do you play?
4-piece. It's mainly instrumental. I sing a few things on the gig just to kind of break it up. Guitar, bass, drums, and keyboards. And
Nice.
it's fun. It gets a bit more fusiony and out there. You know, those guys are more jazz guys, which is always kicks my butt because I'm like, oh man, listen to those guys, you know, playing all sorts of stuff, and it really, it's inspiring. They're so great.
Yeah.
So I love playing with it because I feel like I'm the worst guy in the band, so that makes me feel really pretty good. You know what I mean? That, you know, you're getting pushed all in every night, and it's great.
Most of the time, it's a great way to have it, isn't it? But then every now and again, you're like, oh God.
Oh, I know,
Here
I
we
know.
go again.
Well, as a friend of mine said, because a keyboard player, Walter Fischbacher, is a monster, just harmonically. And I was talking to a friend, he's like, yeah, never compare yourself to a keyboard player.
Yeah,
like, you know, there's no way you
They're
can
real.
win.
They're
Yeah.
real musicians.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And their notes are all in a line.
In a line, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you have to
You want-
left hand,
yeah.
right hand stuff.
You want C, you mean that one.
You got
not
six-
this one or this one or this one or this one.
6 keyboards.
6 keyboards.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting that you mentioned the sort of fusiony jazzy thing as well, because we were talking just before we came on air. Maybe some people know you as the blues guy because of the courses, but actually your influences and your love is more Landau, more Henderson, more
Yeah.
in that world, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I started off, a rock guy growing up, a metal guy, like was in metal bands, you know, touring Europe, thrash band when I was younger, like super heavy in the New York
way.
scene. We opened up for Megadeth and King Diamond. And
No way.
Oh, yeah, no,
man.
And then I was in that band. I won't say their name, guys. And they kicked me out right before the first tour on the record because I smiled too much on stage. They were like this dark image thing. So that was a blessing because I went to music school.
Okay.
And that's where everything just sort of changed for me. Like the world opened
You went to
up.
Berklee,
I went to
right?
Berklee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get there, and I apologies because I don't know my history very well. So if you were in that kind of thrash scene in New York, when was that?
That would have been, now I'm dating myself, of course, 87, 88.
Was CBGB still a thing? at
Yeah,
that-
I played there a lot. Yeah, but the scene was Lemoores in Brooklyn. That was like the heavy scene. There's a great doc on Amazon about the New York metal scene, and I was a part of that whole thing, like Overkill, those bands, and
Oh, boy.
yeah. So it was not the hair metal. I was in a hair metal band when I had hair.
What was the rig? For
The
that?
rig, the hair, Marshall GMP1 with the power amp, and I was
Yes.
playing my Jackson soloist that I pumped. I pumped
Fantastic.
gas for like 3 summers to afford the first soloist, and
Did you have a rack like wet effects thing as well?
Yeah, I
Like
had a
quad reverb or something.
not the Quadro. What was the other one? The DSP-128, right? Who made that? The
Digitech.
Digitech. I had the Digitech, and I had the MIDI foot switch and the whole thing, and
Brilliant.
yeah, and then the Marshall 212 cab. You know, it was fun, and of course I made the big mistake of buying the amp that was supposed to be just like a Marshall part of that, but wasn't. You know what I mean? You're like, it's better than a Marshall. It's like, no, it isn't. No, it's not better than a Marshall.
Oh man, that's cool. And then that all changes when you go to Berklee. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm still a metal head. Like Jake Ely is one of my favorites. Like and Randy and all that stuff. And Michael Schenker is probably my favorite rock guitar player.
Yeah.
Who I think is criminally underrated in the States. Like, I think he'd be made more of an impact. But Jeff Beck, Gilmore, all the classics, of course. But when I got in high school, I remember a friend of mine, some of the guitar mags, right? And they were like, so this guy, like, what's this Alan Halterth thing? So I picked up IOU on vinyl, and everything changed. I didn't even know what I was listening to. Yeah. And then I have an older brother, Steve, who would influence a lot of my music. So he had Wired.
Yeah.
And then I picked up There and Back, and then it just was it, But at that point, I was an Yngwie devotee and fanatic. And
were you playing like that?
Yeah, I was trying to.
Yeah, okay.
And never really got there because I didn't know what he was doing properly. And, it was a golden era to be a guitar guy because the magazines were everything. Guitar Player was exploding, Guitar for the Practicing Musician, all those things. And guitar was really on fire, so to speak, at that point. And the techniques were coming, and people were explaining how these guys do these things, and it was great. So with the Yngwie stuff, I got to a certain point, and then I was like, how come I can't do this right? And then like 20 years later, I'm like, oh, because I was just doing it wrong. Well, and he's also spectacular.
Yeah. And he, like we were discussing before, he does that all the time.
All the time.
That's his thing.
Yeah.
And trying to pick up elements of that, it's like, hang on, a friend of mine is a really great session guitar player. Had to do a gypsy jazz session, and what's his name? The two-fingered
Django
Reinhardt. And he studied pictures of him and the way he would hold the guitar and all that sort of stuff, and it makes all the difference. Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to learn, specific technique. You're like, I'm just doing it wrong.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But Dan and I often say that if we'd come to playing guitar now, we probably wouldn't play because you open up Instagram and there's like a 7-year-old Korean kid, as I sent to Dan last week, playing Cliffs of Dover pretty well.
Well, here's the theory that my friend and I talked about. It's the pedagogy. Like guitar is now where violin was 200 years ago. Like technique is such that it's been taught so much and perfected. So there's nothing. I can't say anything new on violin that I'm aware of, but guitar now people have notated what sweep picking is and economy picking, or odd pickings and all these kind of things. That so younger people with the advent of YouTube, everything is so much easier. Where I feel like where I was growing up, it was coming into its own. So someone can just say, you just do it this way, and then suddenly, that fixed the mechanics of the whole thing, and things were much easier.
I think
that's my excuse.
It's a double-edged sword because back in the day, I can remember listening to Yngwie and Stevie Ray, for that matter, and whoever it was you were listening to, going, I neither understand this nor have any idea what's going on, therefore I'm going to do my best impression of it. Yeah. And that's what you do, and because you're sort of in that blissful ignorance.
Yeah.
And then some dude on YouTube goes, no, this is how you actually do it. I watch it and go, not for me.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I just can't do it.
Yeah. And well, the cool thing is but then you develop your own thing. You're like, I can't do this. Yeah. But learning the Yngwie stuff, then it opened up classical music to me, and I got heavily into that. And I almost went to college for classical guitar, which I'm thankful I did not do that. And then, but yeah, I think it was a great time. And then to with your further question, I started getting into when I got up to college. I listened to like Al Di Meola and all those things prior. Then when I got to school, I got exposed to like Mike Stern, like Upside Downside, We Want Miles, and Schofield, John, and Robin. Yeah. And Scott Henderson with Tribal Tech and all those things that really changed everything for me.
Do you think being in New York had a bearing on the direction you took? Like if you were in LA, would you have gone hair metal and done that?
Probably. I went to LA for a little bit to see if I wanted to do that. And I was like, I grew up in New Jersey, but I was born in New York. Yeah. And when I remember, it was kind of like the end of the hair metal scene at that point, before GNR hit and all that, I was checking it out. And I'm like, wow, it's taking me like 45 minutes just to get from here to there in the car. and it didn't resonate with me, or I could move to New York. And then a really instrumental thing. Well, first there was college and being exposed to and going to school with some guys whose names we would know.
I'll ask you about that in a second. Yeah.
And then I had the good fortune of hooking up with these guys, a band I was in, Liquid Hips, that was an offshoot of a band called Defunct, and these were all like downtown New York jazz musicians, where it was heavy funk with tons of great harmonic stuff going on. And the solos were always open-ended. So we're touring with this funk metal thing, 1991. And
Living Colour looms large.
Yeah, right.
But
we knew Vernon and those guys. It was just a small scene, and then I was the young guy, so I was the metal guy, and I was just hanging out with them, like, what's going on? And hanging out with guys, and you're starting to hear altered and diminished and voicings and funk stuff and understanding groove and all that, I mean, I almost lost a gig once or twice because my funk stuff was just not up to... There was a great story where, like, there was the other guitar player, a great guitar player, his name was Bill Bickford, playing this, we're doing this tune where everybody's dancing, and we stopped the band, and he's doing, like, delay on here. And then everybody's dancing, he would stop the band, and he would do that, and everybody's dancing. So he couldn't make the last gig, so they point to me to do it, and everybody's like... I just completely lost it. I couldn't keep the whole thing going. And so that was that kind of, cold sweat on stage, not in the good way, not in the James Brown way. So that was trial by fire stuff, and then being exposed to that. And then
that's so good for you, though, that stuff, because it forces you to move forward.
Yeah.
The threat of losing a gig. And I mean, I lost a gig in Australia. I actually lost a gig.
You walked in the door and they said, "Not you."
They said, "Out." No, I was playing for quite a big artist in Australia, and I got the phone call the day that we were going to support the Bee Gees, and they said, "Yeah,
wow,
you are no longer required."
Oh,
and it's, I guess we all have those stories, but there are also those times when, like you're saying, playing with musicians who are better than you, really.
I love it.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough when we can get to the Robin stuff too. I mean, being on stage with him, or the much time I've spent with him, you're like, oh, I don't want to curse, but you figure out it real fast that there's a long way to go, and the lessons you learn from playing with people that are better, and hopefully. The thing is, the best feeling in a way when you start feeling really bad about yourself is you're like, well, wait, I'm still in the room with these guys.
Yeah.
So they see something that you gotta live with that and say, okay, I've got this opportunity that people are presenting to me, and I really need to be grateful and thankful and work my ass off to make sure that I don't disappoint or
And again, the double-edged sword. You can see that there is progression to be made.
Yes.
I mean, again, just rewind to being a kid. Where you can't hear it, you can't see it, you don't know it.
Yeah.
Now you can see that there's progression to be made, and that's both humbling and inspiring, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess you've got to be 51% inspired, 49% I want to give this damn thing up, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of it too is one of the lessons I wish I'd learned earlier was like, Jeff Beck is the best Jeff Beck there has ever been.
Yeah, of course.
And all the people we love, they're the best them. So why am I trying to chase my tail to sound like them? Yeah. So find out what my strengths are. And I kind of realized what my strengths are, and tried to want to move forward, but say, okay. And it was a great moment of being at college and learning standards and all this. And then one day going, I don't really like jazz that much.
Yeah.
Like I love listening to it, but I don't love jazz guitar circa like, Wes Montgomery. I don't mean it in any negative.
Sure.
I love playing through a loud amp with overdrive. So when I started discovering guys like Scott Henderson and I can't do that. I mean, Scott's ridiculous. So, but, just finding your way through it and saying, oh, okay, well, I'm a rock guitar player who can play through changes. And that helped open up some sort of gigs and ideas and sounds that I'm happy it did. But then I just came back to one point and said, like, I just like playing rock guitar. Yeah.
Well, let's have a look. I mean, let's have a look sonically where home is for you. Yeah. Like we go to a gig and you're there. What are we going to hear?
Well, I'm a Strat guy, usually. I've tried other things, but I just always come back to Fenders. They're just kind of like home for me.
But that is made by a buddy of yours.
Yes, Michael Tuttle. And Michael's out of Oregon, and this is our signature model. We were going out together, so it's just really like a fine-tuned Strat for the way I like it.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to own a 64 Strat and a 68, and I got really comfortable with the 7 1/4.
Yeah.
But his fretwork and everything is so good that it's the beautifully playing 7 1/4 people. So there's something about that vintage feel. I know it sounds insane, but maybe you guys agree. 7 1/4 sounds different.
Absolutely,
Right?
sounds different.
It sounds vintage. So for me, it's like the 7 1/4, the lighter tuners. So I like the sound of a vintage Strat, but sometimes the playability of my 64.
Yeah.
And there's only so much you can do. It plays great, but it doesn't play. So coming from playing Jacksons growing up, there's a nice feeling of, being able to kind of play. So I guess like sonically, are you asking like my actual sonic sound or the band?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What's going on with the pedalboard?
I think what we'll do is have a listen to some sounds, and then we'll go back to Berklee after that.
Okay.
Perhaps.
So usually how I run my pedalboard, because I live in living in New York City, I run into a clean amp because the volume is an issue. I'd love to be able to use amp distortion, but it just becomes way too difficult. You guys have talked about that quite a lot. And the 4 cable method into an effects loop, and then I play 2 rocks, and you need to get the Eli, or you know what I mean. So suddenly, I just want to get to the gig plug-in. So this, to me, this really solves everything. I'm usually running a clean amp. I set it up for a nice clean. So and then here I got the Shanks ODS1, which is sort of my main. Right, so then I'll just use that as imitating the amp's overdrive.
Yeah, right.
So it's my always on.
It does a remarkably good
It's so
job
good.
of that. Do you remember we had it on the show and we were like, oh my God,
yeah.
have we still got it? Or did I
we
lend
do.
it to somebody?
We do. There
Is
it
that
is.
it up
yeah,
there?
up there.
And, I'm friends with the guys at Vemuram, but it didn't come from other reason of just I played the pedal and I was like, wow, this is
it's
great,
amazing.
Yeah.
And so I'm all about the gain staging because sometimes I want more gain, but not a huge volume boost.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as you guys know a little about. So this has been sort of traveling. So for the first thing is that sort of lead sound. Right, and then I'll hit the Jan Ray, So that's sort of like the lead tone. And if I really, I love the butter machine. It's tweaky as all get out.
Absolutely.
Where do you have the high little control on the back?
I think I've been sort of at noon at the moment.
You do? Okay.
But it's been back and forth. Like I just did the tour and then I listened back to the recordings. I'm like, I need to just, but the problems of living in Brooklyn is I cannot do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because my neighbors will absolutely hate me. And so it's experimental. So I love it. And it's a love-hate thing at the moment until I can really dial it in just
Makes
right.
exactly the same journey.
Because when it sounds great, it
It's
sounds
incredible.
incredible.
Yeah.
Mine's up there somewhere. Oh, here it is. I'm in the hate stage.
I get it. So like this is I put it on there because it does certain things that I really love.
He said exactly the same thing though.
Yeah.
Maybe not about this one, but certainly about the old SD9.
Oh, right,
He's
yeah.
used that exact term, love, hate. Some days love, some days hate.
And it's tricky. But when it's doing its thing, it's amazing.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's hear it then.
And all right, yes, okay, so you get that harmonic feedback. It's really thick and chewy. And for me, it's got that mid thing, so it cuts through really nicely as well when you're
It might
on a
have just
gig.
tipped back into love for me.
Yeah. Well, right. So right now it's sounding killer. It all depends on the amp. You get like too flat. So I might tweak the treble. So a lot of control over it, and so I kind of dial it in for the neck,
Right. Okay.
you know, and I have the tone knob on the bridge there, and
That thump in the bottom is so Landau.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Where it's like,
yeah,
and you get that massive kick in the bass.
yeah.
Killer, man.
But it's also, you know, when Landau, he doesn't have his volume on 10. He's always got on like 5. So
Yeah.
the way he
Oh,
runs it is
okay.
completely different
Yeah.
than we would. But I'm not going to reinvent
Yeah, sure.
the wheel. Now, it'll be super noisy right now. Sometimes on the road I use DiMarzio noiseless pickups just for, you know, because you never know where you're going to play.
Yeah.
And they're like 90% there. There's some things that I miss, but I don't miss the noise on those nights,
okay.
you know.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I put all 3 on, which here would be super noisy and crazy, but it gets you like that
But
kind
let's
of...
do super noisy and
Yeah,
crazy.
Right, so it kind of...
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that though, because it's a real guitar sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got all the histrionic, it's got all the, exactly as you say, all the noise, it's got all the gristle, just
Yeah,
everything around the edge of it, which is completely lost in a low volume,
Yeah.
very sort of safe kind of sound.
But what I love about that tells me that you play in a band.
Yeah, oh,
yeah.
totally. Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's the sound that in a band is like going to be epic.
Yeah, and it
You know?
is. Yeah, yeah. And so what I do to control is I have the volume pedal after the overdrives and before the delays and stuff.
Oh, okay.
nice.
Yeah, right.
So I can, you know, ride it
So
depending
you're
on
not changing
the gain
the
structure.
gain
is not
structure.
changed,
You're
yeah.
just changing it, like using it as like a master volume
Yeah.
after the gains. Yeah, great. Okay.
And that's been great for like gigs where, especially if you want to, where you're like, oh, that's just killing everyone.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
just kind
Pull
of
it back.
roll it back a little bit. That's been useful.
Mm.
I mean, I don't use it as much as I would have intended, you know, but
Right.
on certain gigs it's been invaluable in that sense because, you know, when you want that little boost up, and also if you got a sound guy, you're like, you're going to run over and turn up your
Yeah,
amp
yeah,
and all that kind of stuff too, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Can I have your guitar, mate? Yeah, there
There
you
you
go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Just leave it there. Yeah.
Oh, big.
Yeah, and it really is useful. Also, like I said, in New York, if you're playing behind someone, you want that really kind of, you know, buttery legato sound.
yeah.
Sometimes the volume can get a bit much, so that allows me to ride it
yeah,
a little
right.
better. Yeah.
Killer. These are sounding spectacular.
Yeah. And I'm like, am I a Vemuram fanboy at the moment? Yeah. I just like the way they dial stuff in. I mean, I do have other things like we know as well as I do that everything can change at any given point in time, you know. So, I mean, I love the King of Tone. I got one of those, you know, from Mike and I don't have my old Klon anymore. I sold my gold. Well, I traded my gold Klon for the Masterbuilt Landau.
Oh.
So I have one of those, you know, one of the few.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So that was worth it,
Oh,
you know.
We had a guy come in, didn't we, for an experience day that had one, and it was just like the most astonishing guitar.
It's a great guitar.
Really
I love
cool.
that
Well, there's
guitar, too.
two. There's a 68 with the big headstock and the 63 with the small headstock.
No, this is the 2 humbucker one with
Oh, okay, so the
they-
full-on-
the full on Masterbuilt. They only made like 20 of
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Wow.
And someone
okay.
said, "I'll trade that Klon for it," and I'm like, you know, you know. I mean,
that-
the Klons are great, but you don't want a Klon on a floor at a bar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not going to run around with that. I have the KTR though too. So yeah.
Is that the one which has the Floyd route, but it's been filled back in
No,
again?
no, it's
different
the
again,
one
is
that he
it?
plays on the road a lot, where it's
Oh, okay.
the blondish with
Oh,
the
okay,
two.
yeah,
it
yeah.
had the Lollers with the matching pearloid pickguard.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's this 2 humbucker. It's a pretty great guitar.
Killer.
Brilliant.
I like
Okay.
this better though. Yeah,
You would hope so.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
We got the Octavia.
yeah.
You know, every now and then, because Mick has an Octavia on his board,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I get my sounds together, think, oh yeah, it sounds great, but then he kicks that on, and I go, ooh, damn you, because it's something about that that's just such a great sound.
We were just setting up earlier, and I'm busying about, beavering about as always, and making sure things work. And Jeff kicked that on, and I was like, oh, yeah.
Well, it's the noisemaker.
Yeah.
You know, and I like that playing. Oftentimes I play with a trio, like in New York, I end up playing with a trio, and it's just a nice different sound. You know, and I like they're really expressive. You know, I usually keep the boost off, just use it on as the, you know, the. One of my tunes that's in drop D, but like, you know. Really cool vibe, you know.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
kinda it's just kind of, you know, adds a whole other kind of cool
Right.
dimension. And then, of course, with the overdrive, you know. You know, for me, like, that stuff's the best.
That's
you know,
amazing.
like when you just, I think what's lost when you're playing, like the last two people, I have a fractal.
Right.
And it's amazing for lots of things. And the guy's like, oh, you know, trying to keep expenses down on the tour, this kind of stuff. Like, you think about going like with a fractal? I'm like, no, not with a, okay, if I'm playing in a band that's the same set every night, you know, and it's like a cover situation.
Yeah.
But if I'm playing improvisatory music, and to me, the pedal has become part of the improv.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, how you decide to put the delays on, or
Yeah.
and right now I want to make some noise. I'm going to step on the Octavia.
And you can bend down and just make a
Yeah,
quick
no
bass.
windows, no
Yeah.
menus, no
Well, there's a
nothing.
wonderful video that Rick Beato just put up with Tim Pierce.
Yeah.
And they're in the studio trying out a couple of Rick's amps. And, you know, Tim is amazing.
Sure.
You know, and the real amps cranked up and they just sound great. And Tim says, when you're in the studio, you don't have time to go through menus. You've got 3 seconds.
Right.
They say, okay, we just need a bit more body or need a bit. You've got time to turn a knob. And, you know, if you're doing in different venues and stuff and the sound changes, you need to be able to just go in the middle of a solo, just tweak,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And I can't do that with menus. I mean, you have to really know this stuff. And, you know, it's like you sound check and your hopes is everybody, can I get like a half hour with my amp? Because
Yeah,
everything's going to be
yeah.
different. Like
Sure.
on the last tour, my friend let me borrow his Sir SL67. So that was a great amp, you know, and I had a 112 with a creamback in it. So it was kind of something I was really familiar with. But still, like dialing in a Landau for that amp, which is very different from my two-rock. And then you need that time to sit down and figure it out. But so as for like the Vemuram stuff, I just love and they got good ears. And obviously John Shanks and Michael Landau have good ears too, you know.
Yeah.
So they've just worked for me.
I had a lesson with Mike Stern over lockdown, and it was wonderful because you're talking about you had some lessons with him as
many
well,
years ago, yeah.
and he said, "Oh, Dan, I need a good overdrive pedal," and so I got the guys at Vemuram to send him a Jan Ray,
cool.
you know,
Great, yeah.
and saw some pictures. Still got it on his board. So, but they're, you know, I'm a big fan of their stuff. They always
Yeah.
sound really, really great.
They're kind of heavy.
Yeah,
Like you figure your pedal, like, oh no, yeah. But I think they sound great. Like I said, there's lots of great gear. I think you just find the one that works for you.
yeah, completely.
And at this point, I feel like I sound sort of the same with everything, and it's just this percentage that makes a difference in the way
Yeah.
it feels. And
We have this theory that the gear doesn't really add anything to what you do. It merely puts up less impediment.
yeah,
yeah,
So the right gear for you gets out the way rather than gives you all this adding stuff on top. It just enables you to be you.
yeah,
And I think once you get there and you realize, actually, I am going to have the confidence to sound like me, however grandiose that might sound.
yeah,
Because it's your only option at the end of the day, isn't it?
yep,
Because if you try and sound someone like somebody else, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
no,
And
no.
you'll feel bad. And the right gear, I think, just enables you to
Yeah.
be you.
I think that's a great place to get into the teaching side of things?
Sure.
Because I think most of us will know you. I mean, obviously, listening to an album that you did with Problem Ford, and your recording stuff and your touring stuff, it's great. But most of us will know you as a educated instructor.
Of course, yeah.
And so we've got a couple of questions.
Please.
One of the challenges I think a lot of us have is finding our own thing. The essentials stuff that you teach to get people to a place where they're comfortable in their own skin. Just what are a handful of essential things for people to get down to be able to crack on with that journey?
That's a good question. I think the main thing was said to me very early: anything you practice as if you were making music with it.
Oh, that's very good.
If I'm practicing a scale, I'm not, you can very easily sound like you're yelling with your guitar, like. I will tell everyone, just take your time and just listen to the notes that you're playing. Like, does it have the tone? Can you work on dynamics? Or how do you want to phrase that? And so music is a language, and you're speaking language. You have to learn how to speak the language, and it's not instantaneous. And so that's what I tell everyone. If you're practicing a scale, more importantly is that you're making music with it at all times.
Right.
And I think, we get as guitar players, it could be there's so many great guitar players out there with tons of technique that we really spend a lot of time on that. But my favorite ones that I come back to are always the ones that always just sound great.
Yeah.
So I would much rather, we use David Gilmour as a cliche of that, because he sounds amazing. And the technique, and it's a really funny thing, like, what is technique? David Gilmour's technique is spectacular.
Right.
To sound the way he does.
Yeah, okay.
So, what is your goal? And so if your goal is to get a lot of chops, that's great in one thing, but if we're talking about chops, guys, like, why do we gravitate, towards Eric Johnson? Because he's got a touch and a feel and a tone. And when he plays, it's like you're hearing this individual voice. And I think if you start, what I say to everyone is just start trying to create music right away. Like, just when you're playing a scale, even with a metronome, try to make it musical.
When we had Robin in, and he was showing us some of the half-whole stuff, and he just played it straight up the neck. And it was music, just as you say. And we're like, well, it doesn't sound like that when we play it. Isn't it just,
Yeah.
And he would just say, well, you just play it like this. And it's like,
No, I've been around that a lot with him. Yeah. One moment, we can talk about that too, but I was working on one of the songs we did. I'm like, what's this? He goes, you ever tried doing this with it? And I'm like, no, that never entered my head, and I'll never sound like that. But okay, I'm glad you did. Yeah. But no, to me, it's, the guitar is such a ubiquitous instrument that to get your own voice on it it comes down to your touch and your vibrato and things like that. And there's lots of factors, what pick you use. You can start getting really granular with it. But the main thing is just, I tell everyone, like, when you listen back, is that something you'd want to listen to? That's what was big for me. So I worked a lot on just sounding good, because I think I even heard Lenoir talk about that.
Right.
Like, I just love guys with big tone.
Yeah.
And that was it. I think very few people have it right off the bat. Some people do.
Some people do.
Yeah, of course, but I think it is something that if you're aware of, you can start to figure out and work on. And it's not the amp. I mean, amps help, but you know what I'm saying? It's your hands. It's the way you attack.
All the guitar, all the pedals, but don't tell anyone that. It's slightly dispiriting.
No, they help. No, those are they make it. Yeah, but once but because wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
So rewinding then, where were you when you were when you decided you were going to go to guitar school?
Okay.
Where were you in your playing journey and your knowledge journey at that point? I mean, you must have been reasonably far along because you were playing relatively complex music by the sounds of things.
Yeah, well, trying to play relatively complex music, but I had the great benefit of growing up with one of my, kind of name drop my friend?
Please, name drop away.
Chris Amelar, who's one of my dearest friends since high school.
This is a collective name drop for all the people that have been name dropped so far.
All right, there we go. And, just growing up with a guy who had perfect pitch, who was a great musician.
Right.
So there was this really great camaraderie, and he was into jazz, and he just started helping me through stuff, and I got to study with some good teachers. I always had with my mom was like, well, if you're going to play guitar, you got to go take lessons. And that just clicked with me right away. So I had some really very strong teachers at an early, even before college, who helped me get into Berklee, kind of prepare me for it,
wow.
So getting a lot of the theoretical background together. Doesn't mean I could play well or had it, but I started to understand how important it was, and enjoyed it because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And what it's a giant question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What did Berklee do for you?
Well, the biggest thing was it made me realize, it helped me see where I was, not like I'm better than that guy. Of course, you need, because you're the big fish in a small pond, in northern New Jersey or something. And then you go there and you're thinking, oh, that's Wolfgang Muschbiel in my class, monster players. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, like I really got to work really hard at this. And then there's that, and there's also just the relationships and the friends that I made there, are the people that I'm still friends with and work with. But what it opened up for me was, a whole new realm of music, jazz and fusion and things like that, and seeing some players who names that we know, what I mean now, and you're and it's how good they are, and how far I had to go, and how much I had to work, and it was really inspiring.
Who were some of your tutors when you were there then?
There was Brett Wilmot was one, and Jim Kelly.
Jim Kelly.
Yeah, I took a class with Jim Kelly, who was really super inspiring, because he was the guy they floated on the internet maybe at the time, but like he had transcribed Mood Swings by Stern, and Mood Swings was the big one. So that's a blues. So we learned how to play Mood Swings because it was a blues. A guy named Mike Ide, who took his country class. This is a long time ago.
Yeah.
But those guys it was great. But mainly it was just the environment.
Yeah.
You're walking by a practice room, you hear somebody playing some stuff, and you're like, I got to go practice. And,
And the immersion.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
you're not, I don't know, whatever it is you're doing in the rest of your life, but that's your main focus.
Yeah.
And that is your primary focus.
Yeah.
And presumably the learning just accelerates exponentially.
Yeah.
And, it was one of those places that, like, you could get eaten up very quickly, if you didn't keep up with everything. And so I was in a good group of people. I took a year off playing with bands and things. So when I went, I was really ready to go.
Right.
Because I was like, I'm not doing anything here. And that band had kicked me out, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And my mom's like, why didn't you go to college? You know what I mean? I'm like, all right. And so it was a happy, as a parent myself, when your kid goes to college, you're like, yeah, But it introduced me to like all the guys who I, listened to growing up, and now have the ridiculous honor to play with. You know what I mean? Which is sort of a big moment when when you're guys you grew up listening to, you end up they're being your friends.
And how does that morph into your own teaching journey then? Because that's how we know you best.
Yeah. Well, for teaching for me, there's a bunch of practical things. I started with TrueFire really early on, and they're great people, and things just started to grow, and it worked really well. And touring, I live in New York City, and touring is not, it doesn't pay a lot of money. I wasn't on tours that I could really support a lot of stuff. And I just started getting a lot of students in New York. I taught at this thing called the National Guitar Workshop. That was really a big thing. That's where I met everybody.
Right.
And that folded at some point. But that's where I met Mike Stern. That's where I met Scott Henderson and became friends with all these guys, and played with Grissom. First time I heard Grissom, and then now he's one of my friends, so that was big. And a lot of players, like great musicians or teachers that play are great, like Pat Bergeson, plays, Pat, he's playing with Peter Frampton right now, but he's Chet Atkins heard him playing, son, you got to move to Nashville. So he is one of the best musicians I've ever heard in my life. So you just start getting around these guys, and they become your friends. And then teaching was a viable way to make a living.
Yeah, okay.
And that was really what it came down to. And I enjoy it.
Yeah,
I really love teaching. It's just started to grow. I had a little place in New York City, in Manhattan, centrally located, and my apartment of this smaller than this room, and the teaching started to grow.
Right.
And I enjoyed it. And then I have a son, and I was saying to you guys that I wanted to be around.
Yeah.
So I really pushed forward on becoming more
Sort of
an
coming off
instructor.
the road and spending more time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being
Awesome.
being the parent I want to be. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I made that commitment, and I don't regret a second of it.
How much transcribing were you doing?
In college, a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, and I still do to this day. I think there's a few things about transcribing. I think the main thing to think about is don't try to do the whole solo because it can be really daunting. For me, like I go to this point now where I'll take the line or two that I really want to learn.
Okay.
I mean, because if you're going to transcribe, insert something here that's got it can be really overwhelming, and you're like, I got to learn this whole thing. If it's a blues, like 12 bars. If there's one line that really gets you going,
Get that one.
Yeah, do that bit. Yeah.
and play along with records.
Yeah. Okay.
Seems like to be records, but album, CDs, whatever, CDs, MP3s. But that was a big thing, like putting on, Cream Live Volume 1, Volume 2, and just playing along with it, trying to sound as much like into that vibe.
Because you're doing a lot of work there that you don't even realize, aren't you, when you're doing that? I think to sit down with a video lesson and learn the notes, or if you're doing a transcription or something, all your effort and concentration is there. When you're playing along with a record at home, you're probably worrying a bit less about that. You're probably standing up. You're getting all kinds of motor actions that just then become second nature that are completely separate from learning the notes. And I think it's a skill greatly lost on a lot of people these days, because the environment in which you have to play along to a record is not there anymore.
Right.
It used to be the thing, didn't it? The stereo, the family stereo was in the room, and you were allowed to use it for a certain amount of time, or maybe you had one in your room or something like that, and that was your option. Now it's 18 different Bluetooth speakers all the way around the house, and where do I get the opportunity to go and do this? I don't.
Right.
I think it's changed.
There were also way less distractions back then.
right.
Yeah.
And I find myself annoyingly falling prey to it. Like I'll start practicing, and then my phone will beep, or
ping.
and you're like, oh, that's really important. And then no, it's not. And then so but transcribing was really big for me, and I still do it to this day. I'll go back, and I was working on a Scott Henderson thing the other day, just trying to relearn something that I want that sound under my fingers.
Yeah.
And whether I can play it is less important now that I'm understanding what's going on.
Right.
And then trying to get that under my fingers.
So when you're talking about, listening to, those greats, Holdsworth and that, and when you hear guitar players of that ilk, just having an inkling of an understanding of what's going on, because, I remember seeing Holdsworth in Sydney, and just for 10 minutes, he starts, and 10 minutes later he stops, and I'm just going, there is no way on earth. Yeah. But actually seeing the way his hands moved and stuff gave me a tiny insight.
I can't do
into
it,
what was
but
going.
I understand a little bit more.
And that was invaluable.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing at the time you were, seeking players out and going to watch them. And
well, that's the benefit of living in New York City.
Yeah.
So I had a steady gig at the 55 bar for many years, and I would go see Mike every Monday and Wednesday. I would see Wayne every Thursday. It was kind of like Cheers. I'd walk in, like, hey, Jeff, and they'd give me my drink, and I would just hang out, and so that was a great time in New York City. It's changed a lot, as a lot of these things have. It moved a little bit more to Brooklyn. But I would go see Mike and Wayne all the time.
Wow.
And then anybody else who would come through town.
And that rubs off on you, right?
Mike Stern and Wayne Krantz, in case you're not
Mike Stern and Wayne Krantz.
following that.
And then, then there's the other guys like Adam Rogers and, all these guys who live in New York, and you start to kind of hang around and you see them play, and then inspires you to, and you're living in New York. So, a friend of mine came in from Australia, he was stopped by from Darwin. And I'm like, oh, he came to a workshop I was doing with Matt Schofield. Right. And I'm like, hey, you want to hang out with me and Matt and Christine? We're going to go see Eric Johnson tonight. And he's like his head exploded because these things happen in New York City.
I understand being an Aussie. I understand that.
Yeah, and he's like,
well.
wait a minute. And one night I was done teaching him. I'm like, I don't know, Landau and Wayne Krantz and Jimmy Herring are playing around the corner. I'm not sure if I should go or not. He's like, what are you talking about? You know, because you get so jaded in living in New York City after a while, you know, that I felt like, you know, should I, you know how it is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, just to go back to the board for a second, we've done the gain stages and, you know, sounds epic. I just want to quickly touch on, you've got the Vibe Machine and you've got the El Cap and the Flint from Strymon. Let's just have a quick listen to those and how you're using them.
So I love the Vibe because it's just, you know, Hendrix.
Sure.
Huge Trower fan growing up, Bridge of Sighs, you know, big thing for me. And
You have it before your gain stages,
I have it
right?
before the gains. It just sounds weird after to me.
Okay.
So I always like chorus and flange, all that stuff before because it sounds like Eddie.
Good man.
And, so, you know,
And that's how Trower does it as well, doesn't
Yeah.
he? He has it before overdrive.
And I don't know, I don't know where Jimmy had it, but it's
Jimmy
before.
had both. I
Okay,
think,
but it's before the
depending on-
overdriven amp.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
So it sounds wrong to me after overdrive. It's too much effect. Like it's
Yeah.
just that weird sound. So, you know, I just obviously the whole big. And I just love the way it fills up the space.
Yeah.
But one of my other favorite things is, you know, the vibrato setting. If I got this right. So, you know, you got that kind of. Right, the kind of almost B3-ish. I got the wrong delay on, but you know. So, So I love that sound. And you can get a little more seasick, because you're like. Like I said, I have to be a little careful with it because sometimes I like it too much.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And as for all those times you can't actually take your Fender Vibratone on the subway.
Exactly.
Right,
Yes. Yeah. Which is something we could talk about in New York, because the size of the board and all that. So I don't like menus on any delays or anything like that because I just don't. So yeah. And I've been using El Cap forever. The first one came out. I just got used to it. I just like the way it sounds.
It's great.
Super simple. But I was a little bummed about, I want some presets, except for the one favorite switch. So I got them with the multi. So I kind of have the, you know, typical flat back thing, right? And then here, I just have a kind of a softer, for the first kind of like lead sound. If I wanted this, that's sort of lead delay. Right, and then so for the more dramatic singing, you know. That's fun.
Awesome.
And then one thing I like that people don't use that much. You want to get kind of wild with it, which would be hard to do here, but sometimes on stage I'll just hit that note, let all that stuff ring, and then you can change the speed and you get the whole.
I love that about the timeline
The
as well.
psychedelic stuff.
It does that.
Yeah.
It's
So
such
what
a
is that?
cool
Just
feature.
turn the
Infinite
regen
repeats.
up to
Yeah. And then so and I just thought that the multi-switch is great. Solves that. So this
Is that a TRS jack?
Yeah.
That does the multi-switch?
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's easy. So I just want 3 sounds.
Yeah.
You know, that's enough for
So
me.
it gives you 3 presets.
3 presets, yeah. And if I want, I can have something, I could set something special.
Yeah.
But you can only use it like once, because
Yeah.
the second it goes back.
And is there any hold function, or is it literally just 3 presets?
On the multi,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
it's 3 presets.
So you
yeah, but the
can't
whole
hit it
fu-
twice and there's a hidden one or anything
No.
like that?
No, no.
Yeah, yeah.
not unless
That's
I
still
don't
pretty
think
cool.
so. But I just want to make it simple. So I had a timeline for a bit, and I was like, oh, damn, I
Yeah.
And I had the Halo, sounds amazing. I just cannot.
I'm the same.
Yeah, I
Literally can't work it out.
I can't work it out. And I saved presets and then where'd they go? Like
Right.
So I did get the core Halo, what they call it, which is
the Halo core. Yeah,
which is I was like, oh, that makes sense to me now.
Yeah, sure.
So with reverb, if you're hitting your amp really hard in the front, if there's a beautiful reverb like there is in the classic reverb or something like that, if you're hitting really hard, it can get splashy and get away from you.
Yeah.
And if the amp starts breaking up, so I generally run the reverb into the front end of the amp.
Yeah.
So I can control how much stuff goes on.
Right.
You know? And then
Because you're using a clean amp.
Yes,
right?
because I'm using a clean amp. Yeah. So, and then also if I'm using a distorted amp, if it's got reverb, yes. So I'm not running, I'm not distorting the reverb.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is going to sound terrible. So just kind of, I think you have some reverb on it. Kind of usually the spring or a hall, depending on what it is.
I turned it off in the amp just so.
So I'll
nice.
just go with
That's
what
great.
you know. And then
Beautiful.
just so the tremolo, and then this is now a tap tempo for my tremolo. So I can control all that. So that's kind of everything. And I feel like if I can't do a gig with this, I'm not doing something right, you know?
Yeah.
I have the noisemakers,
Yep.
the tremolo.
The wobblies.
Now there's other units I might like a little better, like,
Yeah.
sonically,
Yeah.
but this is just the one that makes the most sense. And
Yeah.
it's easiest to deal with.
And you pretty much be able to dial that into most pedal platforms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So another reason why I like the Vemuram, it sounds great and everything I've plugged it
Yeah.
into. Because
Yeah.
some overdrives do not play
Yeah,
well.
for sure.
Yeah.
Their stuff plays really well. And then everything's powered. My friend at 30th Street Guitars in New York did the wiring, which he did a beautiful job underneath, which I gave to him because I can't do that stuff, And the obvious stuff, like I left those kind of cables because I'm going to switch that stuff out
Yeah.
on certain
Yeah,
gigs. So when I need it to do it,
Yeah.
It's cool, man.
Awesome.
It's how many times have we said it? A couple of overdrives, a wobbly, reverb and delay.
Yeah.
And trem.
Yeah, right. And then, I have, when I was touring with the band, I took a slightly smaller board, but it was just this. And I just sometimes do a pedal in front on the side, just to
Okay.
easy to travel with. But it came down to those three overdrives, the Flint and the El Cap again. Yeah.
Yeah, magic.
I think I lost the volume knob and the volume pedal, and I lost the tap tempo or something. I can't remember what happened, but
Right. We have to wrap this up.
Yeah.
I could talk to you all day, and we'll get your phone number and we'll video chat you all the time because I've got so many questions. Just a final thing on tuition. What are some things that you see all the time, that just common mistakes that you see all the time, that if you had a magic wand, you could just say, okay, we're just going to sort this out once and for all guitar players?
it's hard work.
Right.
If you want to be good at anything, you have to practice.
Right.
Like, no matter what it is. That's one of the things I teach all the time, even on the YouTube channel, is like, people respond to like, I like that you don't sugarcoat it. It's like, yeah, if you work really hard at this, you can get it. And you may never get it to where you want it. And you're always always going to be a student. And the second you feel like you're not, there's something wrong. You know what I mean? For me, because any musician who's great that I've had the encounter to be friends with or be around or anything like that, the best ones are always saying like, oh, I've still got a ton to learn.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a never ending road. And the understanding, especially if someone's a hobbyist, that I say this all the time, like, you know, if I'm dealing with a student who's a financial guy and I'm like, yeah, you would look at your job and see everything and know what's right because that's your job. This is my job. So there's a time differently. Yeah, there's times that are devoted. So it comes down to time, you know. And I'd also say, I think I see all the time is that people don't practice enough music. And the main one is that nobody, they need to learn how to play the basics first. The fundamentals is the one that people miss all the time. And I get this stuff like, oh, you don't play like you went to music school. I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
like,
okay.
Or my pet peeve is Hendrix didn't know what he was doing. Really? Like, of course he knew what he was doing.
He worked really hard.
Yeah.
There's letters that he wrote to his uncle, I think. They're saying, I was just starting to get this thing together and it's starting to, but he did. He worked really hard to get to where he was.
Right. So, I mean, do you have a name for it? Like, who knows? But there are names for everything. Like, and I've had that. So there's, it's that honestly, like Woody Allen has quoted this, like, you're a consummate professional when you show up. Like, that's what they call you in Hollywood. Like, so for me, it's like you want to be prepared. And if you're going to be a guitar player, learn the guitar.
Yeah.
And there's no...
Be a student.
Yeah, and there's no magic. Yeah, okay, there are people who have this pixie dust. Yeah, there are.
Yeah, for sure.
But hard work is 99% of the gig.
Yeah.
Have you learned in doing this have you noticed any types of learners? So you can look at person A and say, they're going to benefit from maybe this approach, but that person maybe is going to require a different approach?
Yeah. Well, there's a few kinds of guys. There's a guy who knows everything about theory but can't play.
Yeah.
And they think that as a result of learning everything about theory, that they can play well.
Yeah, sure.
And one does not inform the other. And then there's the other guy, just play by feel. And I'm like, well, you could save a lot of time if you just learned how to, play this, The main thing I try to do is find, when I was teaching privately, is what gets somebody excited.
Right.
Because that's the spark. Like, and one of the things I love about what I do, and I'm so grateful, is I kind of use this cliche before that I'm kind of in the happiness business when you're teaching. Like, if you're people want to be, it makes them happy.
I've never had a guitar lesson like that.
Yeah, but
that's the sadness business for me.
Well, I've had teachers who were just like, I remember showing my old jazz teacher some tapping years ago. He's like, "You're a magician, not a musician," and I was like, "Why would you say that?"
Yeah.
And so it's about joy. It's about the love of music and wanting to do something. So I think people we're all doing it really hard on yourself. Like, I beat myself up all the time, and I'm really working hard to not be down on my playing as much as I can. So I try to tell everybody that, but to your question, I think I'm going off topic a bit, but
welcome to the pedal show.
Yeah. What sparks your interest? Like, okay, people say, like, I remember years and years ago, like, should I start off with an acoustic? I'm like, what are you listening to? So like, I really like Zeppelin. I'm like, then don't buy an acoustic.
Yeah.
Like, get the thing that wants you to pick up that guitar. If you, like, I mean, it doesn't freaking cooler, so if you're, right. So if you want a Les Paul, then just get a Les Paul or, something. But I think the goal is to make people understand that it takes time and it's about the journey and it's fun. And if you're making it not fun, you have to reassess why you want to do this.
Yeah, that's great.
And so for me, every time I pick up the guitar, like, some people go smoke a cigarette. I'll pick up a guitar for 5-10 minutes and you're like, oh, everything's feeling better now,
That's brilliant, man.
No, thanks.
Thank you so much
for
coming and hanging out today,
guys.
mate.
Thanks,
it's really,
Thank
really
you.
amazing. And some more journey/fun to be had.
Oh, great.
It is great to connect
really
finally.
inspiring.
Please check Jeff out in all of his various forms. That would be...
There's my teaching site, jmguitarlessons.com, and then there's jeffmcerlain.com.
Okay, go there and check out the TrueFire stuff and all of that as well. Please go to that pedal show store and buy stuff. That's how we stay in business.
Check out new Christmas tea.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
there you go.
Awesome.
Gold top pedal deal.
Gold
Oh.
top pedal there. There we go.
Thank you to our patrons on Patreon. We really appreciate you and everything you do for us. And please click the links down and just see what's in the description box in the video below. I think Jeff's going to play us out. And we will see you soon. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
man.
thank you
Cheers,
guys
mate.
for having me. Yeah, thanks
Cheers,
so
mate.
much. Much
Amazing.
appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.